It was supposed to be hilarious. You should have seen yourself sleeping while I orchestrated my brilliant escape. My name's Luther Caldwell. I'm 31, work as a mechanical engineer back in Louisville, Kentucky. And I was staring at that text message in a Stockholm hotel room at 7 a.m., my wife Sabrina nowhere to be found. Her suitcase, gone. Her toiletries vanished. The bathroom empty of her things. The only things she left behind were me and a growing knot in my stomach that felt like it might never untangle. I called the front desk. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell," the clerk said in perfect English with that measured Swedish accent. "Your wife checked out at 3 a.m. She took the airport shuttle. Said you had different departure arrangements." Different arrangements. I pulled up our flight confirmation on my phone, 2 seats on the same flight to Louisville, departing at 6 p.m. today. But when I called the airline, they delivered news that made my blood turn cold. "Mr. Caldwell, your wife called yesterday afternoon and changed your booking. She departed on the 6 a.m. flight to Chicago. Your reservation has been moved to next Wednesday. Next Wednesday, 5 days from now." I sat on the edge of the hotel bed reading her text again. The words felt like a slap. She thought abandoning me in a foreign country was funny. She thought planning an escape while I slept was creative. She thought leaving me stranded without warning was some kind of brilliant prank. This wasn't completely out of character for Sabrina. She'd always been what she called spontaneous. Last year, she invited 30 people to our house for Thanksgiving without telling me. The year before that, she spent our entire vacation fund on a pottery wheel she used exactly twice. But this felt different. This felt cruel. If you love stories about toxic relationships, strategic revenge, and finding strength in the most unexpected places, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Every day brings completely new stories, each one more gripping than the last. But here's what Sabrina didn't know. I'm an engineer. We don't just solve problems, we document them, analyze patterns, and build systems that prevent future failures. And I was about to engineer the most comprehensive counter-strategy of my life. Walking to the hotel lobby, trying to figure out my next move, I started what I would later call the Stockholm Documentation Project. The embassy wouldn't open until 9 o'clock. I could try to change my flight, but the cost would probably be astronomical. Meanwhile, Sabrina was probably already back in Kentucky, probably already telling her friends about her hilarious midnight escape plan. That's when I noticed her. A woman about my age with blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail checking in at the front desk. She had a rolling suitcase covered in travel stickers and carried a laptop bag that looked well used. When she turned around, I caught her blue eyes, and something in my chest loosened just slightly. She overheard me talking to the desk clerk about changing rooms, about my wife's sudden departure, about needing help with embassy information. Her expression shifted from polite interest to genuine concern. Something told me this woman wouldn't think abandoning someone in a foreign country was hilarious. Her name was Astrid Doctor. Astrid Lindgren, a marine biologist from Göteborg in Stockholm for a conference on Arctic shipping routes. When I explained my situation, she didn't laugh. She didn't call it creative or spontaneous or hilarious. "That's horrible," she said simply. "You must feel completely betrayed." The word hit me like a physical blow, betrayed. That's exactly what I felt, but I'd been trying to convince myself it was just frustration. Just Sabrina being Sabrina. But Astrid was right. This wasn't a harmless prank. This was betrayal. She helped me contact the embassy, showed me how to use the local transit system to get there, even offered to come with me if I needed moral support. When I asked why she was helping a complete stranger, she shrugged. In Sweden, we have a concept called lum. It means balance, fairness. What your wife did wasn't fair. It wasn't balanced. Someone should help you restore that balance. 7:15 a.m. Stockholm time. I spoke quietly into my phone's voice recorder as I walked back to my room. Sabrina Caldwell has stranded her husband in Sweden. Hotel confirms checkout at 3 a.m. Airline confirms unauthorized flight change. Estimated additional costs, $2,847 for extended stay and flight change fees. Emotional state, betrayed but strategically focused. Over coffee, Astrid told me about her research, about the ways shipping patterns were changing Arctic ecosystems. She listened when I talked about engineering, about the bridge designs I'd been working on back home. She didn't interrupt, didn't change the subject to herself, didn't make jokes about my problems. It had been months since I'd had a conversation like that with Sabrina. I learned that Astrid wasn't just kind, she was brilliant, connected, and had the kind of natural charisma that made people trust her judgment. As she helped me navigate embassy procedures and transit systems, I began documenting everything. This woman, I recorded later, represents everything Sabrina pretends to be but isn't. Authentic intelligence versus performed spontaneity. Genuine care versus manipulative theater. That evening, I made my first strategic call. Dante, I need to tell you something, and I need you to document our conversation. My best friend Dante Rodriguez had known Sabrina since college. When I explained the Stockholm abandonment, his response was immediate. Jesus, Luther, that's not a prank. That's sociopathic. I'm recording this call, I told him. I need you to help me build a timeline of every incident over the past 7 years where Sabrina's spontaneity caused problems. For the next hour, we constructed a pattern that was damning in its consistency. The surprise Thanksgiving party that left me scrambling to buy groceries and clean the house while she took a nap because entertaining is exhausting. The pottery wheel incident that meant we couldn't afford the vacation we'd planned for months. The way she always scheduled activities during my sister Clara's visits, effectively keeping us from spending time together. Luther, Dante said finally, this woman has been abusing you for years. We all saw it but didn't know how to say it. By day 3, Sabrina's texts had shifted from gleeful to concerned to annoyed. Why aren't you responding? Followed by, you're being dramatic. Followed by, it was just a joke, Luther. Just a joke. Like leaving someone stranded in a foreign country was the same as hiding their keys or putting salt in their coffee. Instead of responding, I was walking through Gamlistan with Astrid, who had insisted on showing me the real Stockholm instead of the tourist traps I'd marked on my itinerary. She pointed out architectural details I never would have noticed. Told me stories about Swedish history that weren't in any guidebook. We stopped at a small cafe where the owner recognized her and brought us pastries without being asked. You've been here before, I said. My grandfather owned this place. I spent summers here when I was little, learning to make coffee and listening to his stories about the war. There was something in her voice, a warmth and continuity that made me think about family, about roots, about the way people could choose to care for each other across generations. Then I thought about Sabrina. Probably already planning her next adventure, probably already bored with the story of her midnight escape. That evening, I opened Instagram and posted my first strategic move, a photo of Stockholm's harbor at sunset. Caption, sometimes the most unexpected detours lead to the most important destinations. Grateful for the kindness of strangers who restore your faith in humanity. Hashtag Stockholm unexpected journey. Within an hour, friends were commenting, where's Sabrina? Thought you were traveling together? Everything okay? I didn't respond to the comments. I didn't need to. The absence of Sabrina from my posts, combined with my cryptic gratitude for strangers, would create exactly the right kind of speculation. Meanwhile, I was building my evidence folder. Screenshots of every text Sabrina sent, voice recordings of my daily experiences, receipts for every expense her abandonment had caused. An engineer approaches problems systematically, and revenge, I was learning, was just another engineering challenge. But what Luther didn't know was that Sabrina was about to escalate things in ways he never could have imagined. That night, I called my sister Clara. Luther, thank God you're calling. Sabrina's been texting the whole family asking if we've heard from you. What did you tell her? That abandoning your spouse in a foreign country isn't normal behavior, and maybe she should be more worried about why she thought it was. Clara told me things I hadn't known she'd noticed. How Sabrina always scheduled activities during times when she knew Clara was visiting, effectively keeping us from spending time together. How she'd made comments about Clara's divorce that were supposedly supportive, but actually condescending. How she'd suggested that maybe Clara was too negative for family gatherings after our father's funeral. She's been isolating you, Clara said slowly, systematically. And I just watched it happen because I thought you were happy. She's been running a psychological campaign against our family for years, Clara continued. We all felt it but didn't want to cause problems in your marriage. After that call, I sat in a Stockholm cafe and made a list not of things to do or places to see, but of patterns I'd been ignoring. Sabrina's spontaneous decisions that always seemed to cancel my plans. Her helpful suggestions that usually meant I did more work while she did less. Her adventures that consistently put me in difficult or expensive situations while entertaining her. The midnight escape wasn't an anomaly. It was an escalation. Astrid introduced me to her conference colleagues, and I made sure to mention my situation carefully. Not as a complaint, but as a reflection on reliability and trust in professional relationships. It's interesting, I told Dr. Larson over dinner, how someone's decision-making under pressure reveals their true character. My wife thought stranding someone internationally was creative problem-solving. Makes you wonder about their approach to other critical decisions. Dr. Larson, I learned, had connections throughout the international engineering and architecture community. He was also the kind of person who remembered conversations and shared them as cautionary tales about professional reliability. That evening, Astrid invited me to her colleague's apartment for a casual dinner. It was a small gathering, maybe 8 people, and they included me in conversations about everything from Swedish politics to the best hiking trails near Stockholm. No one performed for attention. No one hijacked conversations or created drama for entertainment. People listened to each other, built on each other's ideas, laughed at genuinely funny things. It was the most relaxed I'd felt in years. My phone was buzzing constantly now. 23 messages from Sabrina, escalating from playful to demanding to genuinely worried. I responded with strategic precision, having dinner with colleagues tonight. Fascinating conversations about reliability and trust in professional relationships. Talk later. Her response came within minutes. What colleagues? You don't know anyone in Stockholm. I stared at that message for a long time. The assumption that I couldn't possibly make connections, couldn't possibly be valued by others, said everything about how she saw me and how she'd trained me to see myself. But Stockholm had shown me something different. Here, I wasn't Sabrina's husband, the man who cleaned up her messes and financed her adventures. I was Dr. Caldwell, the American engineer with interesting perspectives on climate-resistant infrastructure. I was someone worth including in professional conversations, someone whose opinions mattered. After dinner, Astrid and I walked through the old town. The medieval streets were quiet, lit by street lamps that cast long shadows between ancient buildings. You seem different tonight, she said. How? More yourself, maybe. Less like you're waiting for something to go wrong. I thought about that. With Sabrina, I was always waiting for something to go wrong, for the next surprise, the next crisis, the next thing I'd have to fix or pay for or apologize for. That sounds exhausting, Astrid said when I told her this. It is. We stopped outside my hotel. The night desk clerk nodded at me through the window. I'd become a familiar fixture over the past few days, the American who'd been abandoned but was somehow still smiling. Luther, Astrid said, can I tell you something my grandmother used to say? Sure. She said that some people will set your house on fire just to watch you put it out, and they'll call it entertainment. I looked at her face in the lamplight, at the kindness in her expression, at the way she'd spent 5 days helping a stranger without asking for anything in return. What do you do about people like that? I asked. You stopped giving them matches. We took a ferry to one of the outer islands, a place called Vaxholm that Astrid had visited as a child with her family. The town was small and picturesque, with wooden houses painted in bright colors and a fortress dating back to the 16th century. But more than the scenery, I loved watching Astrid navigate familiar streets, greeting shopkeepers who remembered her, showing me the dock where she'd learned to swim. This is where I come when Stockholm feels too big, she said as we sat by the water, sharing coffee and cardamom buns from a local bakery. My phone had been buzzing all morning. Sabrina's messages were getting more frequent and more frantic. I showed a few to Astrid. You're scaring me with this silence. I don't understand why you're being so dramatic. Just tell me you're okay and I'll stop worrying. Each message is about her feelings, Astrid observed, not yours. Even when she says she's worried about you, she's really expressing frustration about how your behavior affects her. That afternoon, we visited the Fortress Museum. The guide explained how the building had been designed to defend Stockholm from maritime attacks, how its position allowed it to control access to the inner archipelago. Strategic positioning, the guide said. The fortress wasn't just strong, it was smart about where it placed itself. Walking back to the ferry, I thought about strategic positioning. For 7 years, I'd let Sabrina position herself as the creative, spontaneous one while I was the responsible, predictable one. I'd accepted that dynamic without questioning whether it served me or just served her. I was walking through Gamla Stan with Astrid when Sabrina called. For the first time, I answered. Thank God, Luther. I've been worried sick. Worried about what specifically? About you being upset over my creative surprise. It was supposed to make you more adventurous. I put the call on speaker so Astrid could hear. In the background, Astrid was pointing out architectural details to me, her voice warm and engaged. I made sure Sabrina could hear every word. Explain the joke to me, Sabrina. Break it down. What part was supposed to make me laugh? You always overthink everything. You thought abandoning your husband in a foreign country would be funny. And when that didn't get the reaction you wanted, you escalated to manipulation and guilt. Do I have that right? Silence. Then, you're being dramatic. I'm being documented, I said calmly. This call is being recorded, by the way. For legal purposes. I could hear her sharp intake of breath. Luther, you can't be serious. Deadly serious. I'm considering extending my stay in Sweden. Maybe indefinitely. You can't throw away our marriage over some Swedish woman you just met. I'm not throwing away anything, Sabrina. You already did that at 3 a.m. last Tuesday. I hung up. Within minutes, she'd called back 17 times. That night, I made my decision. For the first time in 3 days, I slept through the night without waking up angry. On day 7, exactly 1 week after Sabrina's midnight escape, on the morning that was supposed to be our joint departure, I made my final strategic move. I woke up early and did something I hadn't done in years. I made a plan for myself based on what I wanted, without considering how anyone else might react to it. I wanted to spend the day with Astrid. I wanted to see more of Stockholm. I wanted to have conversations that didn't revolve around managing someone else's chaos. I turned on my phone and read through 51 increasingly frantic messages. Then I sent her a single text. "Thanks for this experience, darling. Astrid has been wonderful. Stockholm is beautiful. See you in divorce court." My phone rang within 30 seconds. Who the hell is Astrid? A marine biologist who helped me when my wife abandoned me in a foreign country. Unlike some people, she actually cares about other people's well-being. "I didn't abandon you. You changed my flight without telling me, took the first plane home, and left me to figure it out alone. In what world is that not abandonment?" Silence. Then it was supposed to be funny. Fun, creative, spontaneous. I was walking toward the harbor where Astrid was waiting for me. The morning light reflected off the water, and people were starting their day with a calm purposefulness that I'd grown to love. Let me tell you what it actually was, Sabrina. It was cruel, it was calculated, and it was the biggest favor you ever did me. What do you mean? I mean, this week showed me the difference between someone who claims to love you and someone who actually cares about your happiness. Astrid helped me understand something this week. She showed me what it feels like when someone actually cares about your well-being, instead of just looking for their next source of amusement. The line was quiet for a long moment. Then Sabrina started talking very fast. "Luther, you're being ridiculous. You can't throw away our marriage over some Swedish woman you just met. I was trying to help you be more adventurous. You're always so rigid, so planned out. I thought if I pushed you out of your comfort zone, you thought wrong." I ended the call. Keep watching to see how Luther's strategic approach completely transformed not just his situation, but his entire life. Over the following month, I executed what I called the natural consequences protocol. I didn't lie about Sabrina or spread false rumors. I simply told the truth strategically, letting social physics do the rest. Astrid's colleague, Dr. Bergman, had studied marine ecosystems extensively. During one of our dinners, she made an observation that crystallized everything. In my work, when an ecosystem stops functioning, it's usually because one species has become parasitic. It takes what it needs without giving anything back, and eventually the whole system collapses. I knew she wasn't just talking about marine biology. To mutual friends, Sabrina thought stranding me in Sweden would be hilarious. I found out what kind of person finds abandonment funny. To her family, I'm filing for divorce. The Stockholm incident was just the final revelation of a 7-year pattern. To professional contacts, going through a divorce. Learned some hard lessons about reliability and character in high-stress situations. Each conversation was carefully documented. Each person who heard the story shared it with others. Within weeks, Sabrina had made 51 desperate calls to me. I answered exactly one of them 3 weeks later, when she was crying so hard I could barely understand her words. "Everyone thinks I'm crazy," she sobbed. "Your sister won't talk to me." Dante told all our friends what I did. My own mother said she's embarrassed by me. What did you think would happen, Sabrina, when people found out you'd snuck out of our hotel at 3 a.m. to abandon your sleeping husband in a foreign country? What did you think they'd say? That it was creative? That it was bold? It wasn't creative? It was cruel, and now people can see that. She tried to argue, to explain, to convince me that I was overreacting, but her words felt thin and desperate, nothing like the confident certainty she'd had when she was texting me about her hilarious escape. Meanwhile, I stayed in Stockholm for 2 more months. Astrid and I grew closer, our friendship deepening into something neither of us rushed to define, but both of us treasured. She showed me Sweden through her eyes, and I showed her what it looked like to have someone who kept their promises, who showed up when they said they would, who considered her feelings before making decisions that affected them both. The Stockholm abandonment became Sabrina's defining story, the anecdote that preceded her into every social situation. 6 months later, I stood on a research vessel in the Arctic Ocean, working as a consulting engineer for Astrid's climate research team. The midnight sun painted the ice in shades of gold and pink, and I understood that Sabrina's cruel midnight escape had inadvertently led me to discover both authentic love and my own capacity for strategic justice. The beauty of my approach was its elegance. I never sabotaged Sabrina directly. I simply documented the truth and let society draw its own conclusions. Her architecture firm began questioning her judgment when partners learned about the Stockholm incident. The story spread through her firm, where trust and reliability were essential for client relationships. Partners began questioning her judgment on projects, wondering what other creative solutions she might implement without warning or consent. Clients who valued reliability started requesting different project managers. Her professional reputation, built on creativity and bold thinking, crumbled when people realized her boldness extended to abandoning commitments without warning. Her social circle evaporated systematically. Friends who had once admired her unpredictability began to see it as unreliability. Social invitations stopped coming when people realized that including Sabrina meant risking their own plans being derailed for her amusement. She became known as the woman who couldn't be trusted with anything important, whose idea of creativity was other people's crisis. Sabrina's family relationships deteriorated as the full scope of her behavior became clear. Her mother, horrified by the midnight abandonment story, began recalling other incidents where Sabrina had prioritized her own entertainment over other people's well-being. Her younger brother, who had always defended her spontaneity, admitted he'd started making backup plans whenever she was involved in family events, never quite trusting that she'd follow through on commitments. The most devastating consequence was her isolation. She became known as the woman who abandoned her husband in Sweden, a cautionary tale told at dinner parties about the dangers of narcissistic behavior in relationships. Friends whispered about the woman who thought psychological cruelty was entertainment, who had planned her husband's abandonment like a practical joke and then couldn't understand why no one was laughing. 6 months later, Dante told me she'd been forced to relocate to another state, her Louisville reputation so thoroughly destroyed that starting over somewhere else was her only option. A year later, I received a final message from Sabrina. I understand now that what I did was wrong. I've been in therapy. I'm different. Can we talk? I showed the message to Astrid, who was now my fiancée and research partner. She read it and shook her head. She's not apologizing for hurting you, Astrid observed. She's asking you to help her feel better about herself. She's not worried about you, I said, remembering Astrid's words from that first week. She's worried about losing control of you. I deleted the message without responding. Standing on our Arctic research vessel, watching scientists from 12 countries work together to understand climate change, I realized that Sabrina's midnight escape had been the greatest gift of my life. Not because it freed me from her manipulation, but because it forced me to discover who I actually was when I wasn't spending all my energy managing someone else's chaos. The Stockholm incident became legendary in our social circle, not as a story about a woman who abandoned her husband, but as a story about a man who turned betrayal into liberation, who transformed his worst experience into his greatest opportunity. I'd always wanted to visit Japan, I remembered telling Astrid during that first week. The engineering there is incredible. They figured out how to build structures that can flex with earthquakes instead of fighting them. That sounds like something worth seeing, she had said. And Sabrina? She became what she'd always been, underneath the charm and spontaneity, a cautionary tale about the price of treating other people's lives as your personal entertainment. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do to someone who hurts you. Sometimes it's what you build after they've shown you exactly who they are. I built a life worth abandoning her for. If you enjoyed this story about finding strength in betrayal and turning your worst moment into your greatest opportunity, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you thought. Have you ever experienced something similar? How did you handle it? And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more incredible true stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.